The International Monetary Fund, IMF, on Tuesday predicted a slow growth as it downgraded Nigeria's economic growth projection to 3.2% in 2022, a 0.2 percentage point revision from the 3.4% projected in its July 2022 report. The Washington-based institution disclosed this in its World Economic Outlook (WEO) for October 2022, titled Countering the Cost of Living Crisis. This is as the IMF also cut sub-Saharan Africa's growth from 3.8 to 3.6%, while the global economy, which is strained by the cost of living crisis and geopolitical tensions, is projected to expand by 3.2% this year and 2.7% next year, a steep dive from 6% increase recorded last year. The body also predicted that Nigeria's Consumer Price Index, the CPI, which measures inflation in the country, would commence deceleration before the end of the year. For Nigeria, the Washington-based institution called for stronger fiscal and monetary policy collaboration to cage inflation. Analysts, however, say proved difficult, looking at the certain indicators that indicate more headwinds for the country. Well, today on the show, we have Sumbo Badejoko, a public affairs analyst, to look into this particular matter. Well, he joins us virtually. Hello, Sumbo. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, we're looking at this particular downgrade from IMF. What's your thought?
Well, it's actually close to accuracy because there's no way the economy will grow as expected with the inflation that we have in the country at the moment. In fairness to the government, the last Monetary Policy Committee meeting, they've actually tried to put some contractionary monetary policy in place. That was when the inflation, the interest rate was jacked up a little bit from 14% to 15.5%, which is part of the measure put in place to address. But all these are in theory. The Nigerian situation has its own peculiarity, and there's no way we will look at it without not looking at the forex, the impact of the high foreign exchange rates that we currently have, especially in the parallel market that determines most of the things that we do in Nigeria. And of course, we have shortage of forex, and it's holding down some economic activities. So all this is not helping. And by the time you look at it critically, Nigeria is one of the few countries that have that the price of food items is directly linked to forex, even though we have we grow most of our what we consume here of the primary products, but the luxury goods, edible items that are the ones that we import. So these are things that has made the IMF to look at that projection, because they expect countries, government of African countries to do something about it, and in an attempt to do that, is going to slow the GDP growth rate. So what the IMF has released is something close to accuracy as far as the Nigerian situation is concerned.
All right. While you were speaking, you mentioned the foreign exchange scarcity. That's for access to foreign exchange. You talked about it, and you also talked about how that the monetary policy is trying to cage inflation. But of course, when we look at this report from the IMF, it definitely agrees with what a lot of analysts are saying, that there should be a handshake between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. Talk to us. Why are we not saying so much in that regard?
It's because in the current administration, there has always been this lack of synergy in terms of the monetary policy and fiscal policy direction. The CBN controls the monetary policy, and of course the Ministry of Finance handles the fiscal aspects. And you look at our budgeting, we've been having a deficit budget over the years, and these are not something that is good. We have that huge deficit that we are servicing, and of course, it is not what will bring about positive growth, because especially when most of these things are going for recurrent expenditure, not capital. It is capital expenditure that will facilitate growth and not recurrent. So these are the areas where the fiscal policy is not really supporting the monetary policy. In terms of the CBN is actually trying to put measure in place. but activities locally is frustrating most of these policies, and of course, we are not feeling the impact as we ought to feel.
All right, well, as the global economy is headed for stormy waters, now is the time for emerging market policy makers to batten down the hatches. Well, this is a quote from the report. Talk to us. What do you make of this particular report, of this particular quote, and how can Nigeria...
Sorry, I kind of lost the audio at some point. Can you please...
okay, you want me to take that again? You want me to take that again?
Yeah, I lost the audio.
Okay, so this is a quote from that report. It says, as the global economy is headed for stormy waters, now is the time for emerging market policy makers to batten down the hatches.
I'm still not hearing you now. I don't know why.
Okay, well that's okay. Just before we talk about that one, the CBN last month raised the MPR, which is otherwise known as interest rate, by 150 basis points to 15.5% from 14%. Now, banking on the advice of the IMF, what will be the probable or course of action?
Yeah, I didn't hear most of what you said, but if I'm to pick the last statement. The course of action, like I said, the CBN at its own hand have already taken some measures, which in a way is supposed to address the situation. While at the level of the government, there are still some things that need to be discouraged. We have to stop importing certain things. There is too much pressure on our forex balance, and that is why it is not favorable to Nigeria. And until we'll be able to do this, investors will be having that challenges of assessing forex to be able to put policies in place. For instance, let's look at importation of petroleum products. It is one thing that is contributing negatively to the inflation of the food inflation that we have in the country. Why? Because we do not refine petroleum products locally as we speak, as of today. It could change by next month, but as of now that we are talking, we still have zero refining capacity as a nation. That is not good enough. We have to put our refinery in place so that there will be a reduction in the price of petroleum products. That would bring about reduction in the...
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Things.
Asumbo Badijoke, if you can hear me, do go ahead, please. All right, I guess we're having an audio issue or some connection issue right there. Well, we're looking at IMF projection, and for him, he says, fair enough. I mean, looking at all that's happening in Nigeria, locally and across the world, would say that that particular downgrade isn't something that should be a surprise, looking at all that's happening. And we're also looking at how Nigeria is handling the matter. While the monetary policy is doing its best, while the monetary authority is doing its best with some policies, the fiscal authority is probably not doing enough. And he has also talked about oil production and some other issues that are very important. If you can hear me, do go ahead, please.
Yes, I was saying that at the level of the government, there are some things that they have to put in place. For instance, the food inflation that we have in Nigeria today is closely tied to the prices of petroleum products. Now, this is high because we still import the products. We are not refining locally as we speak. Now, importation of petroleum products needs to be cut down to zero level so that the cost of logistics for transporting the food items from the farms to the markets will go down. That would, in a way, reduce the prices. And by the time the prices is reduced, it increases the purchasing power of
All right, very quickly now that you've talked about refining petroleum products, we know that there have been talks about modular refineries, and there are people who are also talking about some private refineries in some parts of the country. I also know that the Dangote refinery is expected to come up as soon as possible. I do not know what is delaying that, but then what are your thoughts if the modular refineries are allowed to fly and then the Dangote refinery comes to stream? What do you you envisage? What do you think, or how well would that solve the problem? By how many percent will it solve our challenge in that regard?
Yes, I was actually on that. That once we have full refining capacity in the country, be it modular, be it private refineries, be it the government refineries, but all the three modes of refining has to be in place for healthy competition within that sector. Now, this would bring down the cost of logistics of moving food items from farms down to the consumers. Now, by the time that is done, agricultural products are largely perishable, so they cannot hold on to high price for long. They have to dispose them at a low price. Now, that will bring down the price of staple food, which will also increase the purchasing power of the consumers, especially in the area of other commodities. Then other prices that are other items like cement, which is also tied to this.
Okay, if you can hear me, do go ahead. All right, we're speaking with Sumbo Badijoko, public affairs analyst. We take a break now, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Stay with us. This is Business Breakfast. All right, in closing now, Mr. Sumbo, in closing, the global economy is experiencing a number of turbulent challenges. We are seeing inflation being higher than seen in several decades. We are seeing tightening financial conditions in most regions. And then we're also looking at the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is lingering. And we also have COVID-19 pandemic, weighing heavily on the outlook. Looking at all of these things, they all seem to give it a negative outlook. But then, is there any positive in all of this globally? Is there anything positive at all?
Those that are having mostly negative impact are those countries that import a lot of what they consume. And incidentally, Nigeria happens to be among those countries. For those that don't import much of what they consume, I'm talking about countries like China. China has not been complaining. Even Russia that has invaded Ukraine has also not been complaining. But other countries that import items that they consume in volume are the ones that have been affected by this global crisis. Now, for the food crisis is linked to the war because the number of grains and wheat that is consumed in Europe and from other countries of the world comes largely from Ukraine and of course from Russia. Even though as the war is going on, they've been trying to create a kind of safe corridor for these items to still be.
All right. I think this is a good place to end the conversation. Many thanks for coming on the show. Well, we've been speaking with Sumbo Badijoko, public affairs analyst. We take a break now, and when we come back, we've got more for you. Stay with us.